Hello and welcome to the International House of Reiki panel for today. And it's a very special one because we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and how it's affecting us as individuals and our communities, and what we can do to work with that and find ways of finding joy and balance in our new lives, as things have seemed to have become quite different and will be quite different for a while. So today we have with us Jeremy. There's Jeremy Tatman and Helene Williams and Frans, Stiene, of course, from the International House of Reiki. I just thought it'd be really nice if you guys just give, just a very quick chat about who you are so that people know what you're bringing to this particular panel and the discussion. So Jeremy, hi.
Hello, my name's Jeremy Tatman. I'm a psychotherapist based in Nottingham in the UK. I've practiced for 20 years as a Gestalt psychotherapist and an EMDR therapist working with traumatized clients, in addition to being a Reiki teacher.
Beautiful, thanks. And Helene, good morning.
Or good afternoon here.
I know.
I'm in Pennsylvania in the States, and I'm a registered nurse and also a Reiki practitioner and teacher. And I practiced Reiki in a hospital for 12 years and also have experience with hospice patients with practicing Reiki as well as the veterans population.
Fantastic, thank you. And Frans, hello.
Hello. I've been teaching the system of Reiki for more than 20 years internationally. And so thank you for everybody coming to this panel. Great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. So, and I didn't mention myself. Yes, Bronwen, Logan. And I've also been teaching for around 20 years or so. And yes, I'm looking forward to today and actually getting something out of this for myself, because sitting at home every day is like, I mean, I normally live quite a quiet life. I don't know about you guys, but, and I live away from the city, so I guess I have that advantage. But being in this environment where you can't really, where we are in Australia, I'm in Australia, we were just talking about that, going to restaurants, we can't do that. We can only get takeaway, and we're only allowed to drive if it's essential. So I'm guessing it's sort of similar in many other countries and where you guys are. Yeah. Okay. So what I think a nice way to start today would be on a really positive note, and that is like, what are we going to get out of this? What are the opportunities that being in this situation can bring us? Anyone like to offer some thoughts on that?
Well, I can speak personally that for me as a practitioner, it's allowed me a lot of time to really work on my practice. So it's not rushing here and there and everywhere and trying to fit it in. It's like really diving deep into my practice. And I think that's a good part of it. And I think there's lots of opportunities also for us to be sharing Reiki with others from a distance, especially in hospitals, healthcare providers. They need that right now.
Yeah. Are you involved in any groups that do that sort of thing, or you do it as just personally by yourself?
I'm involved in a group that we, every evening from 7 o'clock to 7:15, we specifically share Reiki for the community clinic that I run in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But we also include everybody, like, a broad umbrella, of everybody in the world. So, but we have discussed, and I've discussed with other hospitals, like their Reiki volunteer programs doing that type of thing. The volunteers can't go into the hospitals right now, but they could be in groups of sharing Reiki with healthcare providers. And a couple of weeks ago, I put a post on Facebook, just a general post saying, hey, this is a great time for us to all get together, form groups where we can share Reiki with healthcare providers, because they're on the front lines and they're really stressed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And I think also this is a great opportunity. I mean, we were just speaking beforehand that Helene, you went to the restaurant to pick up some food, and a lot of people were stressed. I was walking today to the supermarket, and I really made a conscious effort to look people in the eye and say, good afternoon, how was your day today? And really trying to engage people, even if they were a bit like this. I would still, and they didn't look me in the eye, I would still say, oh, good afternoon, how's your day? Nice sunny day. And then you could see them actually opening up. And for me, that is also Reiki, you know, like more in the line of the precepts in that way of compassion, kindness towards other people, even if you don't know them.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of other opportunities have you been taking during this time, Frans?
I wanted to write, but that definitely didn't go anywhere yet. But yeah, the same as with Helene, doing a lot of practice. And, you know, here's another thing. Nowadays, we see a lot of movement then going into the internet and, you know, Zoom meetings, meeting up with people around the world. I think that's another really great opportunity we can do. But then it's this double-edged knife, I think, also, because, you know, we call it social distancing, but I don't really like this term ultimately. We kind of physical distancing, I think that is a much better term. And because we need to be more social active now, particularly, you know, even if we wave and knock on someone's window and say, are you okay? Or, you know, how are you doing? Actually, we need to more socialize. And I think maybe Jeremy can talk about that as a psychotherapist, that some people I hear now are starting to get really lonely, they start to depressed, you know, and how can we deal with that? So, yeah, in a different way of communicating, I think this is a really important element that we can learn from being locked up, kind of locked up, right? Yeah. And how can we communicate what normally we would give a hug, or we could be more in closer contact. And I think this is a great opportunity to learn that for ourselves and for a wider community.
Yeah. I think in my experience, it's important to acknowledge what we've lost. All of us, we've grown up, and we've probably had a sense of freedom, a sense of entitlement and safety. And all of a sudden that's dramatically changed. And I think that for so many people, they're experiencing the trauma of this abrupt change in their lives, where relationships and roles and routines and ways of being have just been taken away from them. And so I feel that in a sense of mental health, this pandemic presents a great challenge for most of us. We will experience it so very differently, from person to person, from situation to situation. But nevertheless, I think that if I can speak in general terms, everybody will find it difficult. Everybody will be challenged by it in some form or another. And I think that therein lies the potential of the situation as well. I think that in my personal experience, I've been very sensitive to feeling scared, going out into the world and feeling a bit frightened in the supermarket. I'm fortunate I can work from home. But nevertheless, this sense where the external world takes on a threatening appearance, and other people in my community may be perceived as a threat by me rather than as a fellow human. And so I've been really sensitive to my tendency to feel perhaps quite small, and to feel frightened, and to therefore try to work with this, to recognize, to acknowledge the painful feelings that this situation is presenting for me, but then to recognize, but this isn't all that I am, and to see that I can actually begin to acknowledge and to work with those feelings and also those of my clients as well.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about if I were the person who actually, if I had gotten COVID-19, the virus, how that would feel for me and how I would then feel around other people or speaking to other people or having to let other people know about what had happened to me and feeling, I imagine a lot of guilt and perhaps shame about this when, it's something that is obviously, it's pretty much, if we're doing all the right things, it's pretty much out of our hands, isn't it? And even if we're not doing the right things in the beginning, we really didn't know what to do anyway. So, what would you say to someone who was in that situation, Jeremy?
Well, I think I'd be inclined to explore their experience of having COVID-19, possibly unconsciously engaging in activities where that was spread to other people, but to explore what it meant to them, and to see what meaning they could generate from that type of discussion, so that they're not just holding it within themselves.
Yeah.
And I think on the other side as well, many people who are frightened, possibly for the first time, about getting such a serious disease. We have been so privileged, many of us, in developed nations where there are good healthcare systems where we don't feel at risk.
Yeah.
And therefore, these situations really do present the possibility of becoming very frightened, I think. But of course, this isn't the be-all and end-all of it. This doesn't have to be to characterize all of our experience in relation to it. We can move from here as well.
Yeah, it's something entirely unique to us at this moment in time, isn't it? Yeah, and there is
very unique to each person. I saw today, I saw 3 kids playing here in a little river, and then there was also a kid who was not allowed outside, and the parents said, no, you can't go outside, play with other kids. And so there is this, they might look out of the window and see, but there's some kids playing outside. I want to play outside. And so therefore also these young kids also get trauma. Yeah, and I think this is a really tricky situation where we say COVID-19 is the pandemic, but the ramification of this lockdown is so much wider. I mean, if we face it, I looked it up, I Googled it. The World Health Organization said last year, 1 million people committed suicide. Now, this is going to be, this year, way out of control. I mean, you hear it now already, people committing suicide because they can't sustain, they're afraid of their business, they might lose their house, they can't pay the mortgage, they can't pay rent. And I think this is I was reading an article today that Sweden is not really locking down everything. And they say the mental well-being and the financial well-being of people is much better than, saving a very small part of the population. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Who are we to say what is good or bad? But I thought it's a really interesting thing, and I think therefore we also come to ultimately, and maybe Helen can talk about it a little bit because you do also hospice work, but it's the fear of death in our modern world. We have so much fear of dying. And, ultimately we know, for me, I mean, I don't know when my time comes, and maybe I'm very fearful too, but I think the aim of a spiritual practice like the system of Reiki, for example, or maybe Buddhism or Tai Chi or Taoism, is softening that fear of death. And we are going to go one day, earlier or later, we don't know when our time is up, time is up. And so I think this also is a really good opportunity to look at death as a general idea of that we're all going to go.
I think that's, what's coming up for people too, but this, we don't think about it. We don't, plan for it, but now it's right in our face now, right? It can just happen.
Yeah.
With, it doesn't matter if you're young or old. We have to consider that possibility, right? Like if we contract it, maybe that's a possibility for us. And I think, that's where a lot of the fear comes from. What am I going to do? I mean, I've had friends who are redoing their wills right now, because they have this fear that, maybe they will get it. And so it's really difficult. It's a situation we haven't encountered before. And I think it's just, yeah, I think we have to be really compassionate with people to, when we see anger and things like that, we have to understand too that people are just very fearful right now, and we have to kind of look at each situation in a unique way.
Yeah. So, Helene, what would you do to support people with that in your job, or with how would you help people who are having anxiety issues, fear issues?
Well, I'm not working as a registered nurse anymore, but I know that in the hospital that I worked in, I think they're planning to do self-care, come to all the units for self-care practices, meditation, therapy, relaxation, Reiki, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Promoting those kind of holistic things. And there's so many opportunities right now too, and thank goodness we have the technology we do, because there's all kinds of webinars and things that we can tune into. Yeah. So personally for me, people that I talk to, I encourage those things, seek those out, and I find it kind of funny now that people, I feel like people are communicating less, at least for me, I'm finding that. Not as many text messages or phone calls, which I'm missing. I'm missing the phone calls and talking to people, because I'm a very social person.
Yeah.
And that's another piece of it, for those of us who are really outgoing and like to talk to people, it's hard, so there's all these different components.
Isn't that interesting that people, I think you're right actually, that people sort of are slowing down with a lot of those sort of things as they start to slow down. And I actually wonder if that's also, it's one of the opportunities. I know it's difficult if you're a really social person, but that thing that we are actually starting to take life just a little slower, a little simpler. Yeah, because I know we do have the distraction of the technology, but apart from that, I find myself very much more in nature than I have been generally, and just really enjoying the idea that perhaps I have some free time, which I probably don't allow myself. We come in this world, we're like, we think it's so great to be busy. It's like, oh, I'm so busy, and everyone's like, yeah, that's great, you're so busy, and we sort of feed off each other with that. But in reality, to be able to loosen that up, let go of that, and have that feeling of just being able to take a breath, to have some quiet time, and just to sit or just to think as well, I think that's a great opportunity for us, and it is reminding us just that lovely, it's a lovely groundedness, and just having that opportunity to be a little more of ourselves, I guess, rather than always splintering ourselves off into the world around us.
I think we're really fortunate in that respect. I mean, me too, because I can go out into nature every day too. Yeah. But I think, like what I see from what I'm seeing with friends that are still in the hospital, they're like coming home and they're like exhausted, and they're not using, they just want to come in and take a shower and scrub down and, and do it again the next day. And then there's this fear for them that they're going to bring it home to their family and everything else and the unknown. And I think it's really hard for those on the front lines right now to get even a little piece of peace. I think, how can we help them?
That's right, because in that situation for myself, I'm sitting back and allowing those people to do that, basically. And I guess that's the thing, keep out of the way is one of the things. Yeah, don't do stupid things. So
right. Right. Because, I don't want to be a burden to the healthcare system if I fall off, right?
Exactly.
So I'm not doing anything like that because I don't want to have to add the burden to what they're already experiencing.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any thoughts on that? What we can do to help people who are at the front line working daily in that situation, stressful situation?
Well, for me, I mean, I understand why people say on the front line, but I think this is also where we get a lot of people who are in the supermarket who are fearful, and they sit there and go, I need to be working here, and people come in, and then again, not, yes, of course, don't get me wrong, they work hard in the hospitals, etc. But due to this lockdown, there is so much more. And if we only focus on the people on the front line, we actually forget the people being stuck at home who live maybe in an abused family and now they're stuck at home, or a child who lives in an abused family, or I don't know. I mean, there's so many scenarios, and some of us have the opportunity to go outside, but there's a lot of people who live in concrete jungles and in little apartment blocks and who can't go outside. And then we have also that trauma, as what Jeremy was saying. And so, if we keep I like it, when we keep applauding the people on the front line, but then sometimes I think we forget the people also who are suffering due to other elements of this COVID-19. And I think when we solely focus on the COVID-19, we are not seeing the bigger scope of this, where people, and it's going to happen, many restaurants will go bust, I think in the US now, it's at 6 million people ask for social or filled in the unemployment benefit program. I mean, this is a lot of people who might soon don't have money to buy food.
Yeah.
And I think this is pretty scary, I think, in a way, if we only focus on one small percentage of the people. Yes, I get it, but there is so much more at play. And I think sometimes when I look at the media, that I personally think is not emphasized enough.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at this, it seems it's not like a movie. I don't know. I haven't really, I don't know if I've seen any of those movies, about pandemics and things like that, but I get the gist of it.
Have you ever seen it, Contagion? It was a good movie.
I didn't see it. All right. But, I get the gist of it. And, there's lots of helicopters and guns and I don't know what, So, and where this is a very quiet experience for me, yeah, and in that sense, and I think it's quite different to what we might have expected. So, what people could imagine might actually happen. And you're right, Frans. I think that there's all these little places. I mean, domestic violence is. They said that's going to increase, I don't know how many fold, because people are stuck in frightening situations. So I don't know, maybe I'd still like to look at, what we could then do as Reiki practitioners to just support people generally. Any thoughts?
My thought, not necessarily as a Reiki practitioner, but as a psychotherapist, but bearing in mind the idea of being compassionate to yourself and others, is to acknowledge people's pain and difficulty, and for them to know it's okay. It's okay that you're finding this difficult. It's okay that you're finding this overwhelming. Speaking of my experience with clients, I have clients who are inclined to blame themselves for their difficult feelings, have the assumption that everybody else is getting on fine. And yet, of course, this is clearly not the case. So I think
Yeah.
to actually acknowledge this is difficult, this is painful, and it's okay. You're okay to feel this way, and there are ways of working with these painful feelings, to looking after our minds in order that the pain may be reduced, that this intolerable situation for many of you may be eased. And of course, Reiki as a spiritual practice, as having a routine in one's life, can be so beneficial as well within that.
Yes. Absolutely. Frans, do you want to give a little bit of an idea of what people can do on a daily basis who are Reiki practitioners, for example, and some of the things that they might want to do to support themselves through this?
I mean, the first point of call, of course, is, you know, like if we look at the precepts, we can see them hanging behind me and by Helene, is do not anger and worry. I mean, these are the really important elements now. And I see it on a lot of forums. A lot of people are worried. A lot of people get angry. And so, yeah, that is very much associated around the head. You know, when we get angry and worried, our face often becomes red. And so the deep breathing of, for example, practices, the Japanese Reiki practice of Joshin Kokyu is really important. Breathing in your center, breathing in your hara, what is just below your belly button. Grounding yourself, centering yourself. And particularly now when these outer circumstances are so vivid, more than normally, we actually have to put more emphasis on this grounding and centering. And so that, of course, is difficult when it's already out there so much, and maybe you feel you can't get peace because your 2 kids are there, or your husband or your wife, the neighbors are playing suddenly loud music the whole day. And so therefore, again, soften maybe looking at the news. I think also here's another really important element within the system of Reiki. We've got hands-on healing. And here now, when we have to be 1.5 meters away, you know, we are starting to lose this touch. It was already happening because too many people are with these, you know, and touch has become already less and less, I think, in a modern society. So if you can and you live with your family, and it's okay, then give them hugs as much as possible. Hold them, you know, like really, I think this physical touch, if it's possible, without infection, etc., in your family, if it's safe, I think is really important. Also, when we go like this for ourselves or for other people, we go back more into our body, you know, we start to feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
So yeah, really being in your body instead of out there when we worried and anger. So grounding, centering, really important.
Yeah. Thank you. And Helene, have you got any ideas that might be able to support people sitting at home, things that they might be able to do?
Well, I do a meditation every Sunday evening. I opened it up initially just for my students, but more and more people are joining in. So it's a half an hour of usually just, you know, talking about each precept every week. And then from there, tomorrow we're talking about anger. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then just leading a gentle meditation. But again, there's a lot of opportunities with technology that people can tune into, like doing things like yoga online or meditation, Qigong or Tai Chi. There are a lot of opportunities, and you know it's hard because some people can't get out of their apartments. I know somebody who lives in New York who hasn't been out of their apartment for 2 weeks, so that's very challenging. You know, finding ways to keep your mental health, but you know, the practice of Reiki is, you know, wonderful. Like Frans said, we can't touch each other, but we can do hands-on healing for ourselves. So for practitioners, even if you're not a practitioner, you know, I tell people just to hold your heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Self-compassion. Just be with yourself. It's okay, and to breathe. You know, I think we get so tight and we don't breathe, and we get worried and we get fearful, and then everything's like this. But if we can just hold our heart, you know, and just breathe and know that it's going to be okay. and it will be okay. You know, we're going through a lot of struggles right now, but I think that's something that people can do for themselves.
Yeah, I think people who are stuck at home have, I think it could be quite easy to fall into some, habits that mightn't be very helpful. And that might be things like not getting up in the morning, staying in bed, which is nice to do once in a while. But I mean, that thing of no longer having a routine and not knowing quite how to deal with having a full day ahead of you, and what to do with that. People might be drinking a lot, just things that people might be doing to that might be working against them, being because of the situation that they're in, that the feeling that they're in, and not knowing what to do with that. I don't know, Jeremy, what do you have any ideas for people what they could do during their days to help them through that?
I think you make a really good point, because when people are stressed, as they may be at the moment, then we may find that our Achilles heel, forms of behaviour that aren't that healthy for us, might begin to come to the surface again. What I really like about the examples that Frans and Helene have given in relation to Reiki practice is that it's focusing our attention on ourselves. We are not focusing our attention 24/7 on the external world, which can appear so threatening and we can feel disempowered in relation to. So focusing our attention is a great thing, whereby we can feel empowered again. I think it's really important. I actually saw a post from Louisa Eastland Radcliffe, who's a psychologist in America. She said she'd seen 31 clients this week. All of them wanted to talk about the pandemic because it was impacting them. And here are some of her kind of takeaway advice. Establish a routine. If you can, get out for 30 minutes a day. If you can't, open a window, let fresh air in. Move. If you can't go outside, watch YouTube videos or do some exercise. Connect with others if you can and if you want to for 30 minutes a day. Drink and eat well. This is part of our empowerment as well. We can choose what diets we engage with in terms of media, but also food and drink. Have a retreat space if you can, even if it's only a chair where you can go and relax. Acknowledge that you're doing your best, and so are those around you, and that this situation will change. Limit social media. Create order. Rearrange your books, if that will help, if that will give you a sense of control. Be artistic, be creative. Again, we're focusing our minds on something which engages us and through which we can find expression rather than worrying about the world. And remember, this is temporary. And notice what we can learn from this experience. Who do we choose to be in this experience to the extent that we can exercise our choice?
That's beautiful said. And I think sometimes, a while ago, I was at a class, and there's one particular lady who didn't feel so well, and she had an illness. And so we spoke about it, and said, Frans, but I've created a list of things to do. And I said, show me the list. And there were things what would take months to do, right? But really big ideas and stuff, and also quite external. And I said, throw that list away, make something simple, write 10 things down, what you could do once a day. And then for me, like what you're saying, they're simple. We can easily sit down, write a list with 10 things, what we personally get joy out. Is that drinking a coffee? Write it down. Talk to a friend, write it down. Having a shower, or chant, or walk up and down the stairs. And then every day you look at this list, easy list, we don't have to save the world. We don't have to go out there and battle first of all, it has to come from you. You have to feel good within yourself, because that will have an effect on your community. And so if we can look at this list on a daily basis and say, okay, at least today, I try to do at least 5 of these things. What is simple, what gives me some joy or pleasure. Because sometimes if we don't have this list in front of us, sometimes we forget, because we get caught up in the social media or caught up with our mind being all over the place. And so, yeah, simple things like that. I think Jeremy is a fantastic tool for also, yeah, looking after ourselves. What gives you joy as an individual?
Yeah. Absolutely. And at each moment, we have the capacity to choose our relationship to our feelings, to what we're thinking about ourselves, to be mindful. How am I relating to myself? What am I thinking about myself in this situation? How am I feeling about others? And we can choose, we can cultivate a better relationship with our feelings, with our activities. Not saying it's easy, but it can have a tangible impact upon our degree of suffering, I think.
Yeah. And, we have the time, which is, that's, I was saying that is an opportunity in itself, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It was interesting what you were saying about the focusing. Yes, I've been putting on the International House of Reiki Facebook page a daily focus point to bring people back in, because of that whole feeling of everyone going out, and so putting in a focus point and then asking people to sort of like comment about how they feel, and just giving people the opportunity to go, oh yeah, even like that, how do your feet feel on the ground at the moment, and people taking photos of their feet, and just that whole thing of really getting back into being a physical person, being in the moment, being here right now. This is my feet. I feel, I can sense this, and really being able to name the things that you sense. And that is a really comforting feeling, to be back inside yourself in this moment right now.
Absolutely priceless.
So there's I think people do lots of things. I mean, Frans still every day has a lovely quote that he puts up on the Facebook page. I think it's nice for people. I agree with the limiting social media, but I think also, there is that element of connection that we also can find in that. If we look for, as you said, Jeremy, if we look for what we choose, if we choose wisely where we go with that. Because it's very easy on social media to get sucked off into goodness knows where, and isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a compulsive element, I think, to social media. At least in my experience, I can find myself going away, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling stressed again. So it's just being aware that we have that capacity to choose our relationship.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect also of this whole pandemic, and everyone sort of mentioned it a little bit, but this thing that, of getting stressed, and it's often through the media. So, we have a bit of a joke, this thing about calling it Corona news, because it's like, should we put the Corona news on, because watch what's happening. But it's not just the news anymore. It's this tally, every day we get tallies and numbers, and that's when it starts. And, if you start your day like that, you're already beginning with quite a lot of stress. Of course, you are informed. Do we need to be that informed? I don't know, Helene, what do you reckon about that?
That's hard, because it's kind of, I get little, I didn't even ask for them, but I get alerts on my phone, about the number, and I'm like, where'd that come from? It's hard not to go, oh my goodness, that's kind of, I don't need to know that first thing in the morning. It's, again, we have to make a choice. I mean, I think it's, and I suggest like doing short pieces of news every day. So I think it's good to be informed of the latest, because things change daily with this virus, because there's so much we don't know about it. But I think a short period of time we look at news, a short period of time we look at social media, and then really focusing on ourselves, you know, like being present. I think it's great what you're doing with the focus things, because we need things that bring us back to just being for the moment and breathing.
Yeah.
Helene, I'm really interested in something. I know, you know, when we're talking like this, is also, I mean, you're worked in a hospital. So, and I think this now is also, at least in the news, what I read, or the articles I read, when people are dying, you know, what tip, you know, you worked also or help people who are dying, palliative care units, etc. Dying is for a lot of people very fearful. So for me, how do you see this, or how can you say, and this is, I think, not just for COVID-19, because we're all going to go one day or another. We all die. I mean, this is not now, but, you know, overall, what do you feel would be a very beautiful way to die?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Frans.
I know, but I think it's a great topic.
It's the biggest fear. I mean, as a hospice nurse, I worked in hospice for 5 years before I knew anything about Reiki. But I think, you know, I feel like knowing Reiki after I worked at hospice, I feel like I was in that space of Reiki the whole time. I was with somebody who was reaching the end of their life, because it's just, people need to have somebody with them that is present, right? Yeah. And touching and caring and holding. And I think, you know, going back, you know, to this situation now, I just want to, just for a second, because there's so many people who are healthcare providers who want to do that for the patient and the family, and they can't be that embracing person that's there and present that everybody wants at the end of life, right? I mean, right now my mom is in skilled care. Her health has declined, and I haven't been able to see her for 3 weeks. So that's, you know, that's really hard. And I think my biggest fear right now is her reaching the end of her life alone, right? Nobody wants to be alone when that happens. So I think, you know, presence is just so important, you know, because not everybody has a spiritual practice when they reach the end.
No.
You know, and it's a very scary time for the families as well as for the person who's passing. So to have somebody who's there and present with them is the greatest gift. And I think that's really what healthcare workers are really struggling with right now, because they can't really.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if I think about that, I mean, I think it's a really tricky situation. And when my father died 19 years ago, my mom asked him on his deathbed, you know, do you want to talk about things? And he said, no, it's too painful. And, you know, like these things, we have a lot of fear at the moment when we're dying for a lot of people. And then also, I trained with a Taoist teacher for a long time, and I saw her 2 or 3 days before she passed away. And it was just amazing. I sat in the car afterwards, and I thought, actually, I felt really empowered, because we were talking just like how we're talking now. There was no fear and no worry. She was being really grateful for the situation. She was true to her way in her being, and she was so compassionate to herself and therefore to others. And she showed me this beautiful way where I thought, wow, if I die, and of course we're all going to die, I'm going to die one day. How do I want to die? Then I want to die with those elements of the precepts in my mind. So for me, also the precepts are a tool what helps us to focus on and prepare us for death.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult, of course, and we only know when that moment comes. We can talk all intellectually, and then when that moment comes, that is the biggest moment to see how our spiritual practice has been and how we have embodied it.
Yeah, absolutely. I often think, people who don't know anything about the system of Reiki, for example, that, this idea of, why we practice and, talking about wellness and well-being, and I like to talk about that idea of us being whole. And it doesn't mean that we don't die, but that we can die being whole. So it's like dying in a balanced state, in a healed state. And I guess that's when healing takes on a whole, much deeper meaning than like fixing the cut on my finger or something like that. Yeah.
I think then we come to Jeremy again when you were saying, the mind you used just before that, talking about the mind, how important the mind is in all of this.
Yeah.
And I think for me, as I was saying earlier, it's not necessarily just at the point of death where I will see the benefits or otherwise of my spiritual practice. It can be now. It can be going out into the world with this pandemic and feeling frightened. And then what do I do with that fear? Do I focus on what I perceive as external threats, or do I notice the feeling and let it dissipate and hopefully grow? And I was thinking, these precepts point to the possibility of living in a way which is beyond our fearful small mind. And for me, this situation now, terrifying though it may be, challenging though it is also such a rich ground in which I can try and improve myself.
Yeah.
So then come into a space of big mind is really what you're saying.
Absolutely. And dissolving that small self with its very rigid boundaries between self and other and environment and so forth.
Well, I think this is where, ultimately, when we start to realize what you're saying, that boundary between ourselves and others and the environment, we might say, and this is a really big statement, maybe not, that we're all responsible for this. This for me is also, with our greed, with our buying habits, with our communal anger, communal worry, we've created a society what is very I, and there is going to be a reaction to that, environmentally as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we see that increase environmentally of, I'm in Australia where, we've had an horrific year already, fires, floods, and they say that these things shouldn't happen, I don't know, once every 100 years, and they're happening, 3 times in 10 years. And there's this acceleration because it is a response to us being here and how we live. And obviously something like the pandemic is the same, that it is a response to how we choose to live our lives. So how do we fix that? What do we do?
I love the Taoist phrase, if you want to have peace in the world, you need to have peace in the country. If you want to have peace in your country, you need to have peace in your state. If you want to have peace in your state, you have to have peace in your town. If you want to have peace in your town, you need to have peace in your family. If you want to have peace in the family, you have to have peace within yourself. And so it comes back again, as you all said, to the self. We first really have to be whole again within ourselves and practice through that, then we can support others in a much clearer, direct way. And that will have a massive effect on the world. I mean, I always say, you know, if you can notice an angry person walking into the room while you sit in the room and you go, man, that person is angry, I can feel it. Multiply that by 5,000 people being angry, multiply that by 1 million people who are angry, what do we get? Yeah. An angry environment. And this is where it comes to self-responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have that at the moment with fear, as we were saying,
yeah.
A lot of that. So, yeah. And in the beginning, I was talking about, you know, how do we help those around us? And I think that is the answer then, you know, that really is coming back to the self. So coming back to myself and ensuring that I am a healthy, happy, whole individual. And then reaching out and being with others in the best way that I can. And that is through things like we were just saying, social media, or like Helene doing meditation, group meditations. So I think there are lots of opportunities for people out there if they look for it and make those choices to how they want to live during their day and what they're going to do during their day. And yeah. Good. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to ask Frans to take us through a practice that might actually support that, us becoming more whole and balanced and calm in this environment.
Well, I think, you know, a lot of meditation practice just on the breath, but what is great if there's no external turmoil, breath is a great focus point, but breath is very subtle. So from a Japanese perspective, you have something what is called sanmitsu, mind, body, and speech. Speech is breath. And so therefore, the best exercises nowadays is when it involves those three, the mind, the body, and the energy. So it's a visual and a physical movement and something to do with the breath, preferably making a sound. And because we talk about grounding and centering, I see the exercise is like the French pressed coffee, you know, like a percolator, and you press it down. And it is really where you put your hands above your head, just a little bit in front of your forehead. Take a deep breath into your belly. Try not to breathe up here that much, really breathing deep down. The visual is really that you're pressing everything down. So however you want to see it is, murkiness, heaviness, anger, fear, worry, press it down. You do that on the out breath while you make just a very simple sound, ah. So, ah. Deep in breath. This is great to do if you're standing. If you can't stand, then sit on a chair or sit cross-legged. Feel that you're pressing it really all the way down to your feet, out into the earth. Really that purifies you. I think this is a really important, you know, that grounding, that centering, that purification, but try to use as much as possible those three elements. So not just the breath. Your mind is really tricky now. It's really busy. It goes this way. So if we hook the mind to only one element, the breath is now could be very difficult. So hook it also to a physical movement and to a sound. And then the mind has much more focus, and therefore we get less distracted. So whatever you do, no matter if it's whatever kind of meditation or even a yoga posture, if you find these normally would give you peace and quiet, and not at this moment, look at these three elements of mind, body, and speech, and then hook some of those with it to your practice. So do a sound with your yoga posture, or do a movement with your quiet, silent meditation practice, or throw a sound in. Very easy, just the ah sound, for example. Deep breath, mouth wide open, ah. Really feel that you're expelling all that fearful air, all those worries, all that anxiety, focusing on that center just below your belly button. I think that is my advice at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Jeremy, I was wondering if there's anything that you could suggest as well for people to take away from this discussion today?
I think that I would suggest, just to reiterate, that it's okay to have difficult feelings, but we don't need to be characterized by them. We can relate to them and improve them by practices such as Frans has just demonstrated, by choosing where we place our attention and empowering ourselves to have routines which serve us at this difficult time.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And Helene, thank you. I was just thinking perhaps something about that you might be able to help people with, you know, who are in difficult situations, and you know, some ways that they could deal with that. If there's something you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think really just going back to the self, you know, when you're caring for other people and things, it's just remembering to be self-compassionate.
Yeah.
Forgiving yourself, you know, that people are doing the best that they can right now.
Yeah.
Just being present, and, you know, just being in each moment, you know, not carrying things, at least trying to be aware of not carrying things, you know, like have an awareness of that. If you tend to bring things and hold them a lot, is just to sit quietly and just think about that. You know, what am I carrying today that I don't need to, that I can let go of for just a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are out there working in hospitals and those sorts of places where they, you know, they are having to be in contact with people who do have the virus, and, you know, we have a lot of fears about that, obviously. Is there anything that you think that might support them with that?
Well, you know, last night I was talking that we went to this restaurant last night, or I just went in to pick things up. And one of the co-owners of the restaurant, she is a Reiki practitioner, but she's also a nurse. And she told me that one of her patients had called her. They had to talk about their health condition. And she said that her patient was a Reiki practitioner and had sent her Reiki, you know, which I thought was so beautiful. You know, there's that we can do for people we know that are healthcare providers by sharing Reiki with them from a distance, and just supporting them the best we can, you know, putting it out there that we can support. Like Frans said, everybody is going through this. It's not just people on the front lines, but that's where my passion lies. So we can help them just by just holding that space for them. If even as Reiki practitioners, just taking a few minutes every day and sharing Reiki with all the people that are in hospitals and trying to go through these really stressful situations right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. And well, thank you very much for joining us all today, coming together as a group. It's nice to speak to people and, you know, allays our own fears as well, being together and sharing this lovely open environment. So thank you, Jeremy, Helene, Frans, and maybe we'll catch up, who knows, a couple of months down the track and see what's happening.
Yeah, thanks, Logan.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.